To explain this discrepancy, we're joined by the Shadow Assistant Treasurer Mathias Cormann in Canberra. Senator Cormann, good morning to you. Well, firstly, what's your response to Saul Eslake's findings?
Well, we have a very high regard for Saul Eslake, but he has got his sums wrong on this occasion. And I mean, he doesn't have access to some pretty important information about the underlying policy detail and the assumptions. We've been working with the Parliamentary Budget Office through a very rigorous process. And of course, the Parliamentary Budget Office, not only are they aware of all of the detail in our policies, they also have access to relevant Treasury data, which Mr. Eslake doesn't. And I mean, there are some pretty fundamental errors in the calculations that he's made. I'll just give you two examples. Firstly, in relation to our saving from slowing down the increase in compulsory superannuation from 9 to 12% by 2 years, he has essentially just allocated a saving for that for 2 years, assuming that there are no savings at all moving forward, which is wrong, because of course our trajectory remains about 1% below Labor's trajectory all the way to 2019, and only by 2021 catches up with the full 12%. So he's made some errors there. And also in relation to our saving to not proceed with the increase in the humanitarian intake, the government, the Labor Party themselves, costed that policy at $1.3 billion. And Mr. Eslake, for some unknown reason, calculated that as a much lower saving. And of course, presumably he might not have applied the saving across the whole of the government. But again, I mean, we wouldn't expect Mr. Eslake to be able to identify the value of our savings and the cost of our policies properly, because he just doesn't have access to some of the important information that he would need in order to be able to do it.
OK, let's go to that first example you cited. How much more would the coalition save by the slowing down of the super levy increase going forward to 2019?
Well, I mean, I refer you back to Mr. Abbott's budget reply speech in May.
You're the Shadow Assistant Treasurer. You obviously have the figures. Just tell us how much you saved.
I was about to give you the figure, if you're happy for me to give you the answer. And essentially what we've said for some time now is that in 2016-17, the full year saving would be $1.1 billion. And over the forward estimates, the saving from the deferral of the compulsory super increase is about $2.5 billion, and it is an ongoing saving beyond that as well, which is something that Mr. Eslake didn't quite appreciate.
Mr. Eslake says that I mean, the opposition leader and yourself have been talking about $17 billion in savings already identified. He adds up only $13 billion, so that figure is wrong too?
Well, I've just pointed you to one particular error that Mr. Eslake made, which is quite a blatant error, given that Mr. Abbott quite clearly outlined the details of that particular saving in his budget reply speech. Mr. Eslake clearly didn't appreciate this. We absolutely stand by our estimate of $17 billion worth of savings. These savings have been costed through very rigorous processes, and of course what we will continue to do is work with the Parliamentary Budget Office, which has got access to all of the relevant data. And of course we've also appointed an independent panel of experts with people like the Prime Minister's former head of department, Mr. Peter Shergold, who are providing independent verification both of the processes that we have followed and the costings that we have identified. And in good time before the election, we will deliver a full list of all of our policies and their cost, a full list of all of our savings and their value. And what people across Australia will be able to see is that the budget bottom line will be better off under the coalition than under Labor, and that they can have absolute confidence in the integrity and the credibility of our processes.
I want to go to the paid parental leave scheme, which of course has dominated a lot of political debate this week. It will cost $5.5 billion. This, of course, is the coalition scheme. Half of that will be funded by the proposed increase to the company tax for Australia's biggest business. Can you explain to our viewers just how the other half will be made up?
Well, again, I mean, that's been very transparently laid out in our policy. I mean, obviously, the most significant part of the other half is discontinuing Labor's current inferior scheme, and of course the saving from that of about $2 billion will roll into our scheme. And then of course we also will stop public servants double dipping their paid parental leave scheme, because something that is not widely understood is that public servants out of Canberra, for example, right now have access not to one but to two fully taxpayer funded paid parental leave schemes, including one at the full replacement wage. So the Labor Party is suggesting that public servants should have access to two fully taxpayer-funded schemes, but that working mothers across Australia that are not working for the public service should not have access to any fair income paid parental leave scheme. Well, we don't think that's right. We think that this is an important economic reform, an important measure to boost population growth, to boost productivity, to boost participation rates, which will help us grow our economy more strongly, which of course is good news for families and good news for the economy.
Tony Abbott says the costings have been ticked off by the Parliamentary Budget Office. That's correct, isn't it?
Indeed. I mean, the Parliamentary Budget Office has costed our paid parental leave policy, and we have fully funded it.
And you talk about transparency. In the interest of transparency, why won't the Coalition release those Parliamentary Budget Office costings?
Well, what we're currently doing, we are releasing policy after policy, and unlike the Labor Party, with each one of our policies, we are releasing the cost of that policy. We had Mr Rudd the other day up in Darwin. But you haven't.
I'll get back to the question, Senator. I apologise for interrupting, but what you're talking about, I'm asking about a particular policy, the costings relating to the paid parental leave scheme. Why won't you release the Parliamentary Budget Office costings?
Well, Mr Rowland, with all due respect, you are measuring us with two different yardsticks. The Coalition, unlike the Labor Party, with every one of our policies, as we release our policy, we release the cost that particular policy imposes on the budget. That is more than the Labor Party is doing, because Kevin Rudd was up there in Darwin the other week, releasing a policy which changed 3 times during his press conference about a company tax cut on the Never Never, no costing whatsoever, no funding. So you are putting a benchmark on us that you're not putting on the government. Now, in relation to the paid parental leave policy, what we've made very clear is that over the current forward estimates, the additional net cost from that policy is $6.1 billion. That is fully costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office, and it is fully funded. And beyond that, on a yearly basis, the cost is about $5.5 billion a year. Now, in good time before the election, we will be releasing all of the detail, but right now we are going through an orderly, structured, methodical process of releasing policy, releasing the cost of that policy as we release policy, and once we've released all of our policies, we will release a full list of all of our policies and their cost, of all of our savings and their value, and people will be able to see that the budget will be better off under the Coalition than under Labor.
Okay, and finally, and very briefly, Senator Cormann, what do you mean by good time? Is that, for instance, before the advertising blackout comes in a few days before the election?
Well, it will be much sooner than the Labor Party released their costings in 2007 and in 2010, when they released their policy on the Friday afternoon before the election. We will be releasing our policies at a time when people will have ample opportunity to review the numbers, to make judgments about the credibility and the integrity of our numbers and the process that we have followed, and of course of our assertion that the budget position will be better off under the Coalition than under Labor.
Okay, Senator Mathias Cormann, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Always good to be here.